everybody, welcome back to the Red Web, our critical thinking comic book culture and superhero show. Of course, we have our normal co-host, Mr. Greg Burrow, on loan from Dragon's Lair Austin on Burn It. Make sure you go check them out. Thank you so much for letting him come and lend his expertise with us. Then the lovely Miss Anastasia, who is like our fresh young face, and she seems to be like catching up on all kinds of stuff. She's our pulse with the youngins.
We keep traumatizing her.
We keep traumatizing her with some of this.
I'm not that much younger.
I know, I like to pick, I like to tease. My husband, Bo, of course, is going to join us today. And then we have a very special guest. You've seen him on the show a couple of times, Mr. Frank Wee. He does the GLBTQ superhero panel with me at comic conventions, the Queers and Capes. So if we ever get back into cons, make sure you check that out. It is ever evolving and ever improving and ever cool. But today we are going to talk about the new Teen Titans. This month, probably I think this week, is the 40th anniversary of the first appearance of the new Teen Titans. And just to be sure, before I get any further, we're going to explain what the new Teen Titans was. And a lot of people are familiar with Teen Titans as just Teen Titans because they've blown up in media through the years. They've become very culturally, especially from the Cartoon Network show, which made a huge impact. But originally, the Teen Titans was simply the sidekicks of the older superheroes, like Wonder Girl. Actually, we'll get back to Wonder Girl. Kid Flash, Robin, Aqualad. Wonder Girl was interesting simply in that there was no Wonder Girl. Wonder Girl was actually stories of Wonder Woman when she was younger, but somebody screwed up and forgot about that and threw her on the team. So they ended up eventually having to give her her own identity. But they ended up creating Teen Titans #1, adding new characters. And that's what we're talking about is the new Teen Titans. The new Teen Titans, which...
Written by one of my favorite writers.
One of our favorite writers and one of our favorite artists, George Perez, who and designed many of the characters, and Mark Wolfman. New Teen Titans #1 came out in 1980 in November.
That's Mark Wolfman on the screen now.
Yes, and a lot of you will know them from so much of their work. We talk about their stuff all the time. I've got autographs from Mark Wolfman and George Perez all over things. They're incredibly great.
Mark Wolfman's one of the most prolific writers. I mean, he's created probably most of the superheroes you've ever read about. I mean, from
we won't even go over the list. We actually went on
Black
Wiki.
Cat. Black Cat.
You had to get Black Cat in there.
I did. But also he was the person who actually gave Spider-Woman a backstory.
Spider-Woman, he actually... so those are great.
He was...
Blade.
Yeah,
Blade.
He created Blade.
Yep.
He was an extremely
And all that
prolific writer.
Yes.
Yep. And one of his biggest projects for DC is the Crisis on Infinite Earths, which we will get to in a moment. But the original Teen Titans, of course, was just the teenage proteges. And that was actually kind of popular in its own way because for a while, sidekicks were like all the rage, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a story about what they were doing when they weren't following their mentors around.
But it lessened in popularity, and it was in a way kind of comparable to Marvel's X-Men. Well, as you saw on our New Mutants episode, we were talking about how Marvel revamped their X-Men and created the giant-sized X-Men and introduced all kinds of new, crazy, more adulty kind of themes and characters. So DC, in an attempt to compete, they created the new Teen Titans. And George Perez and Mark Wolfman, they kept Robin and Kid Flash, and they introduced some new characters, ones that we are familiar with today, Raven, Starfire, Cyborg, and they even upgraded Beast Boy from his appearances in Doom Patrol to a new character and new powers and new spotlight named Changeling. And this is
all those new characters were created by Mark Wolfman and George Perez.
Yeah. He became more powerful and more confident in his powers.
Yes.
And
And the whole point was to put it in a more sophisticated adult setting because the original Titans titles weren't geared for an older audience. They were geared more for a young, grade school.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
they were that was the target.
They were kids that we could
relate.
But
the
writing style
at the time
was light. There wasn't really deep stories.
Think Super Friends.
Yes. Think more Super Friends. And what Mark Wolfman and George Perez were being encouraged to do is something much more mature, not gritty mature, but as I said, sophisticated.
Sophisticated, yes. And they succeeded too. For the longest time, up until Chris Claremont, they were neck and neck. New Teen Titans and the new X-Men were pretty much constantly competing with each other for the top slot in sales. So for the longest time, they actually were like the go-to it, outselling Justice League and Avengers and everything. And so much so to the fact that in the cartoons of my youth, when they were trying to evolve the Super Friends to make the Super Friends more sophisticated, and they introduced my favorite superhero, Firestorm.
You had to get that one in, didn't you?
I had to get him in. But Firestorm appeared on the Super Friends, they changed it to the Justice League finally, alongside Cyborg. And they both appeared together as the new recruit, young eyes in the team. And what's really cool about that is as I know when the Justice League movie came out, and a lot of people were like, Cyborg isn't part of the Justice League, he's part of the Teen Titans. And it's like, well, actually, first time I ever saw Cyborg, he was part of the Justice League because he was
introduced.
He was introduced to me on the Justice League before I even knew about the Titans cartoons. And then you'll see Cyborg actually ends up becoming what I call the MVP of the characters. He's a breakout star, and he gets a lot of cross-media attention. And the reason for that is he's one of the first genuinely seriously tackled minority characters in a lead position in the comic book. He wasn't a sidekick or a background character.
Or a
stereotype.
He starts out what you think as a very angry young black man. Well, when you lost half your body and got replaced.
You get kind of depressed.
I mean, we have a near-death experience.
You very quickly, Marvin George gave him layers and gave him nuance and didn't have him being like an angry man for 50 issues.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was able to work through his
Yes.
Yeah, there's a couple of stories we're going to talk about here in a minute that really highlight that fact.
Well, I mean, again, we're talking about Marv Wolfman and George Perez, and they were always next level as far as their skills and how amazing they are as creators.
Yeah, and I like Beast Boy now, even though today we call Beast Boy again. He went by the name Changeling for a long time, and I liked Changeling. I liked his characterization. It was slightly less of the. They tend to mirror the cartoon now to make him more of a goofball. And yes, he was more fun and everything, but yeah, he really, for the first time, was trying to get out on his own and be separate from the smothering.
He was trying to prove that he could be a responsible adult.
Yeah. And it was really cool.
Let's get into Raven. I mean, Raven is such a complex and wonderful character.
Yes, and I hate to use the word mysterious.
Yeah.
But that's how it is. Like, you were never quite sure. Like, not just you understood like there's something ominous about her.
Right, pragmatic.
She was manipulating things for the greater good.
Well, I mean,
but I'm talking about
part of
her nature, her powers. Like, she doesn't seem to do a lot, but she's also, I get the feeling.
There's the intrigue.
I'm intrigued. Like, there is something there that I should probably be very leery about. And there's even like there's a certain visual contradiction that George had spoken of that he created. Like, she has a very impractical costume.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah, because when she was introduced, she wasn't in
the nature of her power, she doesn't need a practical costume.
Right.
Well, that was one of the things. I mean, nowadays you're familiar with Raven in the Teen Titan cartoons and everything, and she's wearing a swimsuit with a cape.
Yes.
When she was initially introduced, she was wearing a long skirt with high heels and
she was wearing a sheath gown with a slit, and it was not practical.
But if you can fly and protect energy, you don't care about shoes.
Right, it's like considering what kind of powers that she had. It's like she didn't have to go fight. It was just stand there and
Starfire.
Yeah,
Starfire was an amazing creation by
by the two of them.
Yeah, I mean, all of these characters have gotten their own books.
Yeah. Yes. And you had Starfire, who was alien, who was not only sexy but empowered.
Yes.
Yeah, she was
sexually empowered and confident. And so nobody's taking advantage of me before I take advantage.
So speaking of gaining confidence and growing and being more mature, one of the major highlights that came from the new Teen Titans and now found fan favorite, is the first time a kid sidekick actually broke free from the shackles or the shadow of their mentor was Robin.
It's great because he's not necessarily a legacy character, because yes, there are stories where at some point, yes, he becomes Batman, but no, he becomes his own character.
Yes. So Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing. Nightwing is designed by George Perez, of course. We call this the disco Nightwing costume, which I have a cosplay of, which is, I love it. It's a really fun thing to see, and it was fun to see other artists' interpretation of it. And now, yes, we helped each other with them. And we should do that sometimes, like dueling Nightwings. That'd be fun.
It needs to be remade. It's so old.
But anyway, the disco Nightwing costume was really fun, and it was also a really fun time in comic books. It actually was. It cemented the direction, the mood, the tone that this book was going to be. We're not kids anymore. You know, but they're still young. It was very much more soap opera-y.
Yes, there's still optimism, and there's just enough of a lightness. It's not the book at that time. It's not going to be depressing. It's not going to gut-wrenching.
Yeah.
It can be tragic. It can be sad. It can be moving.
Yeah, but it wasn't one of those you needed a palate cleanser after reading it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just like, you know, why Spider-Man is one of my favorite books is because no matter how hard things got for Spider-Man in the early days,
it was
still, there was that sense of hope and that sense of, and Marv Wolfman, of course, wrote many episodes or issues of Spider-Man, and then created Black Cat and all that, and so for him to be working on this book, he brings that in.
Yeah.
You know, that wonderful element of the older comics where, you know, no matter how dark things get, there's still that element of hope.
Yeah.
There's still that
fun.
And
comic books are still fun.
Especially since two key story arcs that wasn't in the time, in other hands, or in another time period, would have been very ugly. Very.
Well, I mean, just look at, you know, how some people have redone some of their work in in media.
We will definitely get to that.
The Titans TV show, for example, or
you
know, taking elements of you know, Marv Wolfman's work and in many ways ruining it.
But at this point, though, we're still kind of talking about the fun, interesting, unique things that came out of that time. Now, this is another big one, and has had a major impact on comic books ever since then in ways more notorious than others. New Teen Titans was also the first appearance of the character Deathstroke. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with Deathstroke, Deathstroke is the assassin mercenary extraordinaire who has undergone secret government experimentation.
Yes, he can access 90% of his brain.
90% of his brain. His most unfortunate legacy is that Marvel managed to very successfully rip Deadpool off from Deathstroke. Deadpool owes his existence very much to Deathstroke, and even to the name. Whereas Deathstroke's name was Wade Wilson, Deadpool chose the name to Slade Wilson. Slade Wilson, and Deadpool is Wade Wilson. So it's not a coincidence there that they are so.
Right, if they looked eerily similar in
there's
the
a
movies,
reason.
that's why.
However, Deathstroke is a very serious character, not goofy, not crazy.
Yes.
Well, and he's also
very complex.
Yeah, he's very complex because when he was introduced, while he was the adversary of the story, Deathstroke was not a bad man.
He wasn't a villain.
He wasn't a villain. Yeah, thank you.
And his
motivation
to battling the Titans was business.
Yes,
not to
they just kind of got in his.
Yes.
So not to be too spoilery.
And any personal emotions in his motivations weren't directly directed at them.
Correct.
Right? It was he was a bad guy doing bad things,
And
and
something
they
that I
just
had
happened to show
mentioned
up.
earlier is a lot of his issues are the fact that he is due to his questionable parenting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And his oldest son was when you first meet Deathstroke, it's not actually Deathstroke.
Yes.
It's his oldest son. And one of the things I find interesting in this is it's before the movie came out. These comic books were before the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. I'm gonna tell you this. His actual name in the comic book is Deathstroke the Terminator. And then the only reason they changed it to originally in the comic book it just says the Terminator. Because of the success of the movies, they start referring to him as Deathstroke, the Terminator. But he is actually called the Terminator first. So it's a fun little piece of trivia to file away there. But because of the success of the Schwarzenegger movies, they are like, everybody's gonna think this is a Schwarzenegger thing, and it's not. But another really fun one, I know this is a new one that we all had to look up because Frank was like, ooh, salaciously. It's also, tell them.
All right. Going back to this whole idea about more mature adult book, Titans eventually would be released in a direct-to-sales. One of the first ones was known as the Baxter format, which is higher quality paper. And it went to comic book stores, didn't go to newsstands at the time. And so they gave them a little more freedom. And at the time, there's this panel where one of the characters, she has something terrible happens to her. There's blood-curdling screams, demonic screams, and Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing, suddenly, we switch to a scene of him in his bed, and he's interrupted, and next to him is Starfire, and neither of them have their clothes on.
Oh my.
And no, she didn't. No one was renovating her room, and she needed a place to crash.
Yes.
And yes, it was all tastefully covered, and she didn't have a sheet. It was more like his arm blocking the side part of her breast.
Right.
And it was very clear that what they were in the middle of.
So yes.
That they were interrupted, and it was something that did have got a lot of press attention.
It got a lot of press,
but not a lot of fan negative reaction. And George Perez had to say, he's 19.
Yeah.
At least he is an adult.
Yeah.
And from her planet, having sex with somebody she likes is no big deal.
Right.
And so it's natural.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah.
But it caused a few ripples.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, one of the probably the first explicitly shown like, hey, we know what they did kind of pictures on there.
And that just to show that issue was enough of a deal where it's actually referenced in a one-act play that came out like 10 years after the fact. And so, that's how much kind of
how
power.
culturally impacted
Yeah.
it was. And lastly, my favorite highlight from the era before we get to some of the better storylines is of course
one of my favorite also.
Phoenix. Yeah, you gotta have
No.
Phoenix.
I thought I have that one signed.
You gotta have Phoenix in there too.
that one's
I know.
But yes,
I love it.
it's so it was only natural that at some point that the new Teen Titans would meet the new giant-sized X-Men. And so in 1982, it is actually still considered out of all of the intercompany crossovers one of the best.
Yes.
And most both by fans and critics approved. Well done, and of course that owes a lot to the creators and the artists.
And it was a very intelligent story, this took place after the character Phoenix was originally killed, and it's about her getting resurrected and trying to be put to use by one of DC's master godly villains.
Darkseid. He's trying to manipulate the Phoenix Force.
So it was a perfectly great way of crossing over the two teams, and one of the funniest moments for me that I remember, and I got that issue when it came out. That's how old I am. Is there are a group of aliens when they come across the Titans, they think they're the X-Men. And so when one of them are attacking like Starfire, that must be that one they call Storm.
Storm.
I'm gonna have to reread
Right,
that. I don't
would love
remember
to
that.
read that.
Yes.
Very, very
So
cool.
And there's a very cute moment where I'm trying to remember which two. I'm trying to remember if it's Nightcrawler and Terra or Kitty and Changeling accidentally disappear for a moment in a boom tube and come back. And they're respective surround saying, "We didn't like that. Hey, what's she doing in this lab?
What's she doing in his
What's she doing in this lab?"
This is not right. Oh, Tara. We will talk Tara in a minute.
Well, and one of the things I would point out, so part of the whole formation of the new Teen Titans was Raven was trying to get help from the Justice League,
Yes.
and they shunned her because, of a dark energy off of her. Well, in the X-Men versus the new Teen Titans, Wolverine has issues with her for pretty much the same reason.
Yeah.
He senses something dark about her, and it's like, yeah, casting stones in a glass house here.
Right, it doesn't sound as fun coming from
Well,
originally was Zatanna.
She's basically Dark Phoenix.
Yeah, she's
well,
Dark Phoenix. That's true. That's true.
That's true.
She's Dark Phoenix, so I can see that as the parallel.
Which we are getting to when you explain that.
Yes. In the original story, when Raven first shows up, and the reason she forms the Teen Titans is she actually goes to the Justice League first, and Zatanna outs her as dark magic. Is like, no.
Yeah. No. Of course.
They dropped that ball.
Because basically her father's the devil.
Yes.
A devil.
A devil.
Right. Details.
You know, which
but yeah, she comes seeking help to protect the world from her father, and Zatanna's going, no. She's evil. Don't help her. And it's like, she's looking to help protecting.
Right, there's a reason.
Stop being judgmental. I mean, look at what you're wearing, and you want to judge her?
No, she's Rosemary's Baby.
Yes.
Toss her out.
And so that was basically the first major story arc of Titan, was the Terror of Trigon.
But that goes back to talking about, Raven being manipulative.
Yes.
Part of her manipulations, she used her empathic powers to make Kid Flash think he was in love with her.
Yes.
And that's how he helped convince everyone else to reform the Titans to help her.
Yes.
Until you
didn't go over well when they figured that out.
Yes.
And that was a contributing factor for him eventually.
Yeah.
No. Too much drama.
Too much
drama.
Yeah.
As is fair.
Well, that's also one of the things about the Teen Titans.
Yes.
And they've had a long history since then of rotating members. That the new Teen Titans era really opened them up to not just having sidekick characters, but rather young characters altogether, and it also helped them open up a lot more diverse elements, a lot more interesting characters.
And it should be noted this whole, when we talk about the Terror of Trigon thing, that's actually a very long arc.
Yes.
And when we talk about the ominous and the intriguing part of Raven, and when you see Dad, that's what she could turn into.
Yeah.
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 Ooh,
exactly.
Ooh.
But again, and you can't really separate. You really can't really separate the Trigon story from Raven at all in the storyline.
No.
In every iteration, there's some of the new Titans. There's Trigon.
Yeah. But that was one of the things I liked about the new Titans. Also, comparing it still to, of course, the giant size X-Men, the new Titans is one of the last times that they actually went with introducing, to me, a true level of diversity, introducing new characters and not just retooling old ones. And so DC in our modern day and age falls into the same trap that Marvel falls into.
Yeah.
No, we don't want to create new characters.
No.
Let's reuse and change this one.
And it is ironic that you had 3 brand new characters in a team that originally was almost 50% women.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the brand new Teen Titans, which I think, did it end? No, it's still going on.
Which?
Crush.
The current story in the comics.
The Young Justice.
The new comics that are now going on.
Oh, okay.
Don't they just,
I'm sorry.
3 or 4 years.
Damian Wayne spoils everything for me.
Let's not go there. We're not going in that era.
Yeah.
We're
talking
We'll talk
about our feelings in 15 more minutes.
So, right.
Well, anyway.
So, getting into feelings.
Yes.
One of the next major storylines that were really impacted, and you see a version of this in everything that has been Titans, is the Judas Contract. The Judas Contract, is that where Deathstroke was first introduced, or did he?
No. Deathstroke was introduced in the 2nd issue.
Yeah.
And the Judas Contract is the accumulation of 30+ issues
of his stuff,
of his storyline. It goes back to what's saying about this. All comes down to him being a bad parent.
Yes.
And a bad husband, where everything comes together, and we have this character of Terra that was introduced, who seems to be this sweet thing.
Another
15.
Another new unique original female member.
That went over very well with fans. She had
perhaps a little too well.
She was an Earth Elemental, and then we find out that she's actually a plant by Deathstroke to infiltrate the Titans to get intel, because going back when we were stating how his son became this other character called the Ravager, and agreed to a contract to kill the Titans, and it was a contract that Deathstroke turned down. And when his son died trying to do it, he tried to honor his son by taking over the contract. But of course, he's much smarter than his son because he's an old, experienced mercenary, and he used Terra to infiltrate, get information so he could capture them. And this is where we get into the more shocking part of the story, where basically Tara is a combination of Lolita and the Bad Seed.
Yes.
Where not only is she a willing partner and compatriot, she's having an affair with Deathstroke. 15 people.
Yes.
15.
Hey. Surprise.
Yes. And this storyline has, if you've got Titans and you've got Terra and or Deathstroke, you're going to have the story.
Yes, and
every single version
and
I've
It's
ever
been made
seen.
into a DC animated movie. It's been brought over to
Yes.
multiple different times,
They
And
reference it in
It
TV.
Yeah.
just seems to get
And the Teen
creepier
Titans
every
TV
time.
show.
because basically her character is a total narcissist and a total sociopath, and she is unfortunately a real villain.
Mhm.
Where as we said, Deathstroke was a more complicated character. It's not personal. It's not personal against the Titans. It's him in his own weird dysfunctional way trying to make up for being a bad father. And ironically, the same way is what ends up like having the whole plot line resolved and the Titans rescued, again from him trying to be a good father versus again making up for another child of his that he screwed up.
Yep.
And that character was
Jericho.
yes.
Oh, Jericho. And again, diversity. We actually have someone. He wasn't hearing impaired. He was mute.
He was mute.
But he's still someone that had to communicate using sign language.
Yes.
And this is one of the more impressive things about George Perez as an artist you were telling us about.
Yes, and what happens is when George was doing it, he was actually using ASL sign language, but the only time you ever heard his voice was when he had the power to possess people, and when he was in a body possessing, then he would speak. Otherwise, you never heard his thoughts. You didn't hear any thought bubbles. Everything was expression or sign language, and that was a very unique thing. And that's the sort of innovation you can expect from George. And it's something unfortunately that can't, when he left the book, it's not something that you see carrying over from other artists.
Yeah.
And that brought him unique because it also gave a unique dimension of the way to characterize Jericho, who was actually at the time, a very genuinely sweet and decent human being.
Person.
Yeah.
And in spite of the fact of all the trauma and family dysfunctionality they had, where his father is a mercenary, his mother is a soldier, his brother got brutally
And also
died.
that really bad costume.
Yes, and
I'm sorry. That Jericho. I mean, we're talking about the pluses of Perez's designs. This isn't the bottom end. I mean, he took chances. Okay, you got to give the guy that. But the Jericho was at the way bottom.
cosplayed that in college.
Oh, okay. I apologize for
And
that.
Halloween costume. I got that one. But it wasn't easy spraying that blonde. But it brought a very interesting and novel way to bring characterization to somebody, and it worked. You actually felt this person. You felt he was the most compassionate and likable, and that's the only word I can use, decency.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Decency.
Yeah.
And to have like Twyla decency.
Right.
That's a Schitt's Creek reference, by
Yes.
the way. I have to get that in.
And I'm up to season 3 now. So we're gonna swap these last two storylines because I got them on the board in the wrong order.
Yeah, you did.
We're gonna do A Day in the Life. This is another very important storyline in that it's not a superhero storyline, but it is. We're talking about how Cyborg.
It's a people story.
It's a people story.
Which
We're
is
talking
something about what they brought, what Marv and George brought to the book that make it stand out is the Titans were still human beings.
Yes.
They had lives.
Yeah.
They had layers. It's not always about punching a bad guy.
Right.
And Day in the Life was unique in that there is no villain. There's no fighting. There's like what is going on in some of the members' personal life.
Yeah.
And I've always kind of suspected that was more George's influence than Marv, because you see that in Wonder Woman.
Yes.
You see that very much.
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
But anyway, they're one of the more distinct ones. Going back.
But it was popular enough and well done enough that, I mean, it sold as well as any of the other action stories did. I mean, this was a testament to how popular not only those characters were, but how well received their storytelling was. And as we were speaking earlier of Cyborg and how he really evolved as a character, as a person, is something that they don't do as much of him in some of the more modern stuff as they could. Is they were showing how he dealt with his, which in essence is a disability because he's more or less, high-tech prosthetics. Yeah. And you wanted to tell them about that part.
And one of the storylines is that he actually helps out the kids who have prosthetics themselves.
Oh.
And
he works in a shelter
he works in a center to help them and guide them. And he brings Raven along, and Raven and they know, the kids there know who, he can't keep a secret identity.
Yeah.
And they know he's the Titan and they know about Raven from talking through Cyborg, through Victor. And one of them asks Raven, I hear that you have all these special powers. Can you heal me? Can you give me back my arm?
Oh.
And she very gently just has to say, no, I can't do that.
Oh my God.
And Victor brought her in purposely to let the kids know, like, no, there isn't some magical solution that's going to give you back your arm or your limb or take away the pain. You have to learn to deal with it. And she actually talked to him like, I hope that's okay that I told her the truth. Yes, that's why I brought you here.
Right, that's the point.
That's the point.
My
They
heart.
need to learn that.
Yeah.
And so they have to deal with this. This is reality. And, nobody can snap their fingers and make the problems go away.
Right, and to think of like kids that are reading this that have prosthetics, and it's like they're talking about such a subject with all this like care that I'm like, oh my God, that means so much.
Yes, you can live your life, and that's the one storyline that always pops out. I honestly don't remember what the other ones were. and that kind of storytelling pops up every so often through the book, through those first 50, 60 issues.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the perfect way to lead into Donna Troy.
Donna Troy. So this one has a little bit more setup than we have to go to. So we were speaking earlier about Marv Wolfman and George Perez and their impact on comics in general, but especially in DC Comics. Now, as I mentioned before with Firestorm, he was a new character at this same period in time. And when DC did their company-wide crossover to reboot the universe, just like Firestorm was new and fresh enough that he managed to transplant into the post-Crisis on Infinite Earth pretty much the same. So was the new Teen Titans, because they were that same time period. And Crisis on Infinite Earths was written and drawn by Marv Wolfman and George Perez. And so they had the power to keep these characters intact and move them over and keep them that way. And one of the big things that really came out of it was George Perez got so much acclaim from what he was doing that they actually, when they rebooted the universe, they...
Maybe this is the Donna Troy.
The Donna Troy comes after.
No. Wonder Girl is after. Donna Troy is before.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
that's right. It's who is Donna Troy? Who is Wonder Girl.
Yeah.
So, okay. So beforehand, like I had mentioned, you're right. Thank you. See,
that's what we brought him here
for. We need the Frank for. So before the Crisis on Infinite Earths, like I mentioned before, nobody really understood where the hell Wonder Girl came from, because there was no Wonder Girl. She was like Superboy, Adventures of Superman when he was a boy, and all of a sudden somebody at editorial gets confused. They put Wonder Girl on this team of Teen Titans. Well, they tasked George and Marv with writing a story to explain her origin. So who is? It's first.
Prior to that, they always said.
Wasn't it first who was Wonder Girl and then
Who was Donna Troy? Because she was always the best that they came up with is that she was an adopted sister of Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman rescued her, brought her to Paradise Island.
At one point,
she got trained into becoming a full-blooded Amazon.
But then,
who was she?
Before she got there?
Before Wonder Woman came and rescued her, and that was the storyline. Again, no villains. It's Dick Grayson being a detective, finding out her history, who she is, who her family is.
Right.
And what was significant about that, and this is why it's important to say Pre-Crisis is.
Pre-Crisis.
It leads up to the wedding, because she's engaged.
Okay, that's right.
And issue 50 is her wedding, and again, no villains.
No villains.
Not like the Fantastic Four weddings.
Or every other wedding in comics, where there's always like supervillain gate crashers.
Have old friends, old Titans coming in, enjoying Donna committing herself to, at the time, what was supposed to be a really good guy.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And it was all the love and the warmth and the humanity, which is what they infused in the book. Post-Crisis,
well, after Crisis, George Perez got put onto relaunching Wonder Woman.
Yes.
And just like many of the Superman stuff got erased, in Post-Crisis, they wanted Superman to be the only Kryptonian, and he didn't get his powers till he was adult, so they wrote Superboy out of the stories. They wrote Supergirl out of the stories, any other things like that. Something similar occurred with Wonder Woman, whereas the new rebooted Wonder Woman, they just kind of explained who this Wonder Girl was, and now she kind of has no place anymore.
Yes.
So
because they're contemporaries, and there's no way for Wonder Woman to come to rescue Donna Troy
if she's already
bring her
dead.
back to the island of the Amazon.
Yes.
Oh boy.
So they kind of wrote themselves into a corner, and then the second story was called Who is Wonder Girl?
Wonder Girl, where they found and they had to give her a new origin. She was amongst a group of proteges from different races of the original Titan gods.
The original gods of Titan lore. Yes.
Yes.
And they even went so far as to say she was the one who subconsciously named them the Teen Titans.
Yes.
Because in the back of her mind, she knew she was descended from the Titans.
Yes. And she took on a new identity called Troya, and another costume that only George Perez can get away with drawing, and only Spider can cosplay.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? She actually did pull that off. I have to say yes. It does require a certain panache because that's one of those ones that had to be. The current Wonder Girl Donna Troy costume we have takes elements from it and merges it with her original Wonder Girl costume. So it's kind of like one of those like the disco Nightwing, stepping stone Nightwings costumes. But yes, so that gives us all the super duper fun of Wonder Girl Donna Troy.
Yes.
Now
and those were like the kind of storytelling that was done in the what you can consider like the prime era of the new Teen Titans.
Mm-hmm. And they were really popular. I mean, this came out in 80. By 82, they were already crossing over with the X-Men. By 84, this is where we get into some really fun cultural impact of them. We got like food companies fighting over them. And I always thought this should have been the other way around because I keep thinking Keebler Elves and the little pixie boots, but it's actually Nabisco. Nabisco had managed to work out a deal with DC to get Batman and Robin for some of their promos. So when Keebler came and got the new Titans to do some of their promotions, especially their anti-drug campaigns and child abuse campaigns and stuff like that, they could not use Robin. They could not use Robin because Robin was over at Nabisco. And so George Perez, like, literally created this character, the Protector, and drew him on top of... He had already had, like, layouts for some of this stuff. He drew this costume on top of Robin as, like, a pasted Robin. And it's an amazingly fun and rare and obscure character.
It's very 80s Saturday morning TV type of costume.
Oh, yeah. It is very purple and red.
Purple and red.
It's really crazy. I will cosplay this one day. It's on my list. But this is 1984, and these are some. It even went so far as to have an animated public service announcement with this Protector Robin costume and the new Teen Titans, Starfire and Cyborg.
Protector doing Nancy Reagan's will.
Yes. This is definitely the Just Say No era, which is really kind of interesting because we're talking about some of the original Teen Titans, one of which was, of course, Speedy, Green Arrow's sidekick, and as we have mentioned on this show a couple of times, one of the most important landmark comic issues was
it turned out he
Green Lantern, Green Arrow, number 90,
recovering
85.
Substance abuse.
Yes.
Oh, yes, that covered.
So where Speedy is a recovering substance abuser, they actually bring Speedy back into one of these issues.
It's like, look back to our Comics Code Authority episode for that.
to look back to, so it actually ties it in really neatly. It's a very important, impactful comic book. And these comic books were given away free in schools. They came free in newspapers. I mean, this was a huge push. And it's really fun that the new Teen Titans are like out there, but Robin is over here and he's like, "Oh, sorry, I can't be."
I'll be with my milk and cookies.
I'll be with my milk and cookies. But yeah, it's like I always think Keebler should have had Robin because of the shoes. But anyway, because the Keebler elves had the same pixie boots. But and eventually this would lead to many years of different reboots and redos, and comics had their own ins and outs and stuff like that. Until it just finally got to the point where other writers and artists started following suit with Nightwing and growing their characters up. Speedy ends up becoming the character named Arsenal and ends up working for the DEO, one of the spy organizations.
Yes, Donna Troy, well, she's literally all over the galaxy.
She's all over the galaxy, and she's being called Troya.
All over the multiverse.
So, Kid Flash in the Crisis, Flash dies, and Kid Flash becomes the new adult Flash, and then they just get all the way, and they grow everybody up. They turned Aqualad into Tempest, and I think that covered everybody, right?
Yeah,
from the original ones. So,
yeah, because at that point, Beast Boy or Changeling goes back to being Beast Boy.
Okay, this is the one that irritates me. Okay, everybody gets a grown-up name, but Changeling swaps his grown-up name out for his kid name and goes back to being Beast Boy. Well, as everybody else grows up, and he doesn't. But
right, even though I feel like Changeling is a more grown up
name, which is why they give him that name. But he went back to Beast Boy, but that's not here.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it goes back to the point where eventually,
Teen Titans just becomes plain
Titans or New Titans.
New Titans.
And George eventually does leave the book because he gets other projects. He gets Wonder Woman, those are 50, 60 glorious issues of great production. And that, when he's doing that, he can't be doing Titans.
Right.
And
but eventually, to fill the gap of Teen Titans, then you get Young Justice.
Well, before Young Justice, I want to put this out there because there was this dark time in the 90s for the Titans. This very dark time. And I
can see the empty space between the 85s and the 2000s. It's like, oh God, what happened?
It's okay. In the 90s, Crisis on Infinite Earths was when they were trying to reboot their continuity to make everything easier to follow.
Yes.
They didn't do an awesome job.
No.
And so when my Crisis for me was what they called 0 Hour,
yes.
which was where they were supposed to we're going to fix all of the mistakes that we made, and we're going to
they cleaned up all of their continuity.
We're going to clean up all the continuity that was here. Which led to another thing, and thus begot the endless cavalcade of annual crossovers. But no.
Yes.
But in this story, though, this is where they come up with the Otherworld Terra I was telling you about. So there's this book called. First off, they regress the Atom to a teenager, and he becomes the leader of the Teen Titans. And this is like the worst Teen Titans ever. Like, these are some dumb characters. I mean, this one, they specifically, what the diversity of this character? His name was Risk, and he was a white trash superhero. That was his whole
white trash superhero.
His whole shtick is that he was a trailer trash superhero.
That's amazing.
It was horrible. And then at the same time, they had the Team Titans.
Oh, bless.
So anyway, it was a big old mess. So finally, they
you would have titles that would last like 3, maybe 4 years.
Maybe
die out, and then come back again in a couple years.
And they kept trying
and going.
Which eventually leads us to somebody else goes, okay, well, we can't salvage the Teen Titans, but we want to go back to the original Teen Titans formula. And at this point, you've got a new Robin, Tim Drake. You got a new Kid Flash, Impulse. And you got a new Superboy, Connor, the clone of Superman. And
Wonder Girl.
Well, Wonder Girl comes on. She comes in the actual ongoing series, but they first appear in a special together. And instead of being called Teen Titans, they become Young Justice. The reason this is important is because they're essentially the new Teen Titans. They just aren't called Teen Titans anymore. And it gets to the point by the early 2000s that they remerge and they rebrand, and the Young Justice becomes the Teen Titans. And from that point on, they kind of tend to bleed into each other.
Right? Yeah. We just flip-flop ever since.
We just flip-flop. So basically the point is to continue talking about the Teen Titans, especially the new Teen Titans, as it gets into other media, which is our next section. There are parts of it where it is indistinguishable from Young Justice. And that is some specials you can read. There's some amazing comic books. Young Justice was a fun book on its own. When they became the Teen Titans themselves, it was a fun book on its own. But that's where that legacy pretty much leads us up to. And then we get to other media. Other media outside of the comic books. And this is where some of the fun stuff. Now, the very, very first attempt at Teen Titans, and this is pre-New Teen Titans, there was a really odd, on the Superman Aquaman Adventure Hour in '67, they tried, Filmation did a little snippets of the Teen Titans. I never actually saw those.
Little shorts.
Yeah, little vignettes.
I mean, I think one of the more popular ones were the Aquaman ones, where he was like riding around on his seahorse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aww.
Yeah. So all I remember from that one is that they got Kid Flash's colors wrong.
Yeah.
Like badly wrong. They
Kid Flash was a redhead, but they gave him black hair. They made the yellow parts of his costume red. They made the red parts of his costume yellow.
Considering the amount of care, shall we say, Filmation was known for.
Right.
They were just like, good enough.
They tried.
But it's also funny to note that, the little video things when the Titans would communicate with each other. You had the Titan in the home base, and then he'd video chat the others. There are 4 panels, one of which was always empty because Robin was on the Justice League with Batman and the Super Friends, so they couldn't use Robin.
Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm screaming! I love it.
But and.
They did try, apparently, this is like a little weird one I found in some research. In '74, they tried to make it never went too far, but they tried actually adding new teenage characters to the Teen Titans. And we get Narc, the Cave Teen. I'm not making this up. You just have to Google it. It's
he's actually in the old book.
They actually put him in there? Okay.
He's in
I've
new
never even
stuff
heard
too.
of him. Oh, that's right, but he doesn't look like a caveman anymore. They give him like a uniform.
Or it's like
he's got clothes.
It's like on the later TV shows, he's there as a caveman.
Okay.
Just then on the comics, they're like, we're gonna give him a uniform.
Yes,
we're going to slick him up.
Weird.
Yeah. And then of course he said Cyborg got his own.
And Cyborg got
in the Galactic Guardian.
In the Galactic Guardian superpowers.
And
so
then
that
we got to the 21st century.
Yes, and God bless Cartoon Network, who had the forethought to go, let's just keep the Teen Titans completely separate from the Justice League. They had already had plenty of success with continuing on the Bruce Timm universe, the Batman animated series, Justice League, Justice League Unlimited. But the Teen Titans,
this is like, about where we were jonesing for superheroes. Yes, it's like we had Batman in like 5 different forms, and we were like, give us more.
Exactly. But they decided
there was more other than Batman.
They decided to go with quirky and use an anime. They did anime stylization and even teen Japanese pop music, and it was a hit. It was. This is many people today, even older fans. This is still their first exposure to the Teen Titans.
Right? If you had anime conventions,
I love the characterizations of the characters.
And
especially Starfire. I thought Starfire was
the wide-eyed, the innocent.
Yeah,
they did skew them a little bit younger.
Those versions are often cosplayed.
Yeah.
And Raven was awesome. Yeah. And I mean that's where you start to get the Beast Boy.
The goofy cut up Beast Boy.
Yeah.
Raven,
and the loud bombastic Cyborg.
Raven is a goth, and you contrast her with the perky
Pollyanna.
Right.
And it just works so well.
Yeah.
And it lasted for years.
And then one thing that is fun to note is that if you go back and watch the show, if you're not aware of this, they never refer to Slade as Deathstroke. They call him Slade.
He's just Slade.
He's just Slade because both Deathstroke and the Terminator were deemed by Cartoon Network as too extreme for children.
Yeah. So
the Terminator sounded dark.
They put the story in. They put the Trigon
story in. They put the Trigon story in. They even put a version of the Judas Judas Contract. I mean, like they had Tara.
It was probably the tamest version of the Judas Contract ever.
Creepy Tara.
That was kind of the shock for me, for those people who are having to guess our ages. This is about where I was growing up.
Yes.
It's like, this was my first exposure to this stuff. And
so when I told you that Tara was skeezy.
The only version of the Judas Contract I knew was from the original Teen Titans TV show. And suddenly I'm hearing, oh yeah, you should watch the new version. It's much worse. And I was like, what are you talking about? And I'm like going through the Judas Contract story, and it's just like, it's like, for reference, for the 5 people who forgot. It's like the Judas Contract in the Teen Titans show. It's just,
he's blackmailing her, right?
Yeah, they're coworkers that he had to threaten and blackmail her, and she's sort of she's a begrudging participant.
Yes, yeah, she's not as willing.
Like, yeah, you go from one of those, like, she still hates the Titans, but she's not. But it's not like a malicious thing. It's just sort of oh god, I can't believe I have to do this. And it goes from that to, oh no, this is supposed. She has the hots for Deathstroke, and she's like walking out in negligee and cute little blush, just like, hey man, it's like, oh no.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, this is why we toned it down.
Easy. It is definitely a little bit.
It's like, because the age differences are a lot different. It's like, we're talking older teenagers for most of this. Teen Titans was more geared towards like 13 through 15.
Yeah.
Being nice and generous.
Well, and originally they had intended to spin off the Justice League animated and keep them in their own thing. But the only reason I find that interesting is if you go back and you look at the original sketch designs, they had intended on creating a female cyborg girl, who was more or less based on Steel. If you're familiar with John Henry Irons Steel from the Superman comics, his niece, Natasha Irons. But
cool.
Eventually, the Justice League animateds go off, the Teen Titans go off, and then you have the Young Justice animated, which was met with much critical acclaim. Incredibly well-written stories, and like I said,
for a much older audience.
Yes. And like I said, it was
darker.
This is the 16 through 18.
And even though it was called Young Justice, it was a lot of
It was really Teen
Titans.
Yeah. They have a cuter name now.
Yes.
Cyborg shows up on the Smallville show. This is where I tell you that Cyborg ends up like MVP. He ends up in everything. Eventually, Teen Titans ends up canceled and becomes the Teen Titans Go,
which drops the age group down to
a lot. There is a lot of fan interaction between that. You want to get on the message boards on that?
It grows on you.
It does grow. And then we come to the direct-to-video. Oh, and then we talked about the direct-to-video versions, including the Teen Titans versus Justice League
again,
and
again,
and the Judas Contract animated movie. If you want to check that.
Right, and to be fair, I kind of get why they did the Judas Contract now that I've looked at the broader scale of it, because it's like, it's
an important piece of Titan history.
The most important part of the Titans isn't just that they're superheroes; it's the family element.
Yeah.
And these big stories that they keep repeating over and over again are things that disrupt their family unit in like a huge way.
Yeah.
I
get it. It's just one of those. This again.
And that's what I should say, like, even though it's called Young Justice, in its DNA, it really is the Titans, because it plays on that.
Yeah, it's about their
especially the revival
is like Artemis and, oh, yes, Dad, it's really me.
Right.
Yeah. Batman the Brave and the Bold was another animated series we talk about here sometimes. I just want to throw that one in there because I love that they did the episode where Robin becomes Nightwing.
Right, never forget.
And of course, like I said, Cyborg in the Justice League movie in 2017.
Which got the shaft. I'm still upset about.
Yeah. We're going to do a whole
we'll have
thing
feelings about that.
We'll get to the Snyder. Yeah, we're going to do a Snyder show.
We'll talk about our feelings in a later episode.
But yes, then we have the current iterations. The Young Justice Revival, the anime series from 2010, got brought back with some amazing stories, amazing characters, and they're using
Aqualad.
Yes, and again, Aqualad. And then the actually polarly, crazily awesome and awful DCU streaming services, Titans and Doom Patrol. Now, the Doom Patrol show is like.
Right.
It's phenomenal. It is
I love
phenomenal.
that show.
It's very ambitious. I'd say probably avant-garde.
Avant-garde.
There's
Yes.
some stuff in it that I'm like, you guys need to exploit.
It treats, it does give a very layered look for Victor Stone.
Victor Stone. Which is
Yeah.
really interesting because, as we mentioned earlier, Beast Boy originally was on the Doom Patrol. And of course, Victor Stone is on Titans. But they swapped places in the show. So on the Titans show, Beast Boy is on Titans, but Cyborg is not. Cyborg is taking his place on the Doom Patrol show.
And you can probably, in some of the writers' minds, like, the two belong on the other show better.
Yeah.
In the themes. And I said,
Yeah.
Doom Patrol is character-based.
Yeah.
It's a very avant-garde character-based, a very ambitious, a very
Which their version of Beast
challenging.
Boy wouldn't really fit into.
It has very challenging plots, and I don't mean and when I say
That's
the
a
word
cute way
challenging,
to word it.
it's like it dares you.
There's some plots in that one.
Yeah.
Titans tries so hard to miss the point of what the original show, the original comic book was. As we were talking about earlier, how it was able to get adult but not get dark. That's my problem with the Titans show.
Well, that's the current problem with a lot of comics.
Stuff.
Is everything wants to be dark.
Everything wants to be the next Watchmen.
Well, I'm so tired of.
But unfortunately, it takes us to the scale.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
And
You
there
can't
is that they confuse adult with dark. Is equating.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
especially when you
Or
start
ugly.
doing character
Yeah.
assassinations, because that's basically what the Titan show is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Character assassinations. I mean, especially when you get to Starfire, and I think the actors are doing a great job. It's not them at all. It is the
It's
writing
the writing.
and the direction.
When the
Even
first
with, like,
trailer,
most
when the
of the
first
things.
trailer for that show came out, and Robin said, "That's Batman," as my jaw just dropped. I'm like, I was so excited for this until this moment right now. I was like crushed.
That version of Robin, him and Bruce never had that level of animosity.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they fought, but I mean, it was like,
But
family.
it was family. It was a father-son disagreement.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you can go jump off a bridge and I'm not going to care.
Well, also, one of my biggest, there were several big things I had problems with when it came to Robin. First off, we're talking about Dick Grayson.
Yeah.
Probably the most well-adjusted of all the Robins.
Yeah.
I would say that's
absolutely.
without a doubt. And
I don't know.
so, who's more well-adjusted than Robin than Dick Grayson?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry. Tim is well-adjusted.
Tim,
is
oh
not
my
as
gosh,
well-adjusted
and that's
as
another
Rob-
thing.
as Dick.
Right, you want to talk? Let's
Tim
talk
Drake.
about our feelings for Robin.
And Tim Drake, it's like Tim Drake is my favorite. Right? I'm like, I love.
We can
Tim
have
Drake.
a whole episode.
He is my Robin. And then they're like, they put out this casting call for because Tim was the first in the modern era of the 90s. He was the first real
Oh, Lord,
he's the first real tech genius Robin. That's his whole shtick, is that he was the one that figured out who Batman was on his own and converted Batman. That's how he pretty much got the job. He's like, hey, I know who you are.
Yeah. He did true detective work, whereas Jason Todd
so now,
removed the hubcaps off the Batmobile and Batman goes, let's take him and make him a protege.
We're going to turn you into Robin. Whatever.
That's post-crisis.
Yes, but still.
We're going to get really off track.
But-
We're running out of time.
Yeah.
2 minutes.
But so anyway, yeah. No, actually, I think we hit it where we were.
Yeah.
It's like you're out where Titans are now.
But we can go on and on about
If you,
Titans.
we need to do another. We need to do a hate rage episode. Make sure you catch us here live every other Tuesday at 7:30. Like and subscribe. I am going to say one thing though. God forbid that they do the Judas Contract story on the current Titans show.
No,
because
please.
I don't think I can handle that.
I don't think I could handle that.
It came to my head.
I would need a therapist after that.
Okay, so thank you again, Frank, and everybody for joining us. I love it. We're going to do some more fun episodes before Christmas, including a Wonder Woman episode for Wonder Woman 84, and what else do we have on the board?
So much fun.
So much fun.
We're still doing the episode.
Lots of
I
stuff.
don't know if the movie's coming out, but we're still
Yeah,
doing
even
the
if the movie does
episode.
not come out, we're going to do an 80s night.
Well, we're going to do a Wonder Woman tribute.
We're doing
Yeah.
a tribute. We're doing Wonder Woman tribute, yeah.
And then after the movie comes out, we'll do a review after.
Review.
Right.
We
Just
still
a
need to
direct
work on getting me a mask so I can do Ferdinand.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, this has been the Red Web with Brad West, Anastasia, Greg, Bo, and Frank. And thank you so much for joining us. It's fun to talk to you, talk comics, and think critically. You have a wonderful day, and catch us next time.
And thank you, Gavin, for producing.
Oh, you get.